We are still in good morning phase. So my name is Emma Schwartz, and I'm the chair of the Agency Operations Committee. It is 11:26 a.m. and I would like to call the April 26th Agency Operations Committee meeting to order. Please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast via the internet. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome those who will be joining us via Zoom and ask if they observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak, mute your microphone when not speaking, and keep background noise to a minimum. Members, when I call your name, please announce present. Welcome Wilson, Vice Chair.
Present.
Javed Anwar. Fred Farias.
Present.
Robert Gaunt.
Present.
Donna Williams. Present. Georgia Haney, student member. Present. And Emma Schwartz, myself, I'm present. Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. Agenda item 2 is consideration and possible action to approve the minutes from the January 25th, 2023 Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion for approval of the January 25th, 2023 minutes? So moved. Motion by Donna. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by welcome Wilson. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The motion passes. Agenda item 3 is public testimony. We do not have anyone registered to testify today, so we will go on to the next item. Agenda item 4 is approval of the consent calendar. We do not have any items on the consent calendar today, so we'll move on to the next item. Agenda item 5A is a report on grants and contracts. This item does not require any action. Members' reports were included with the agenda materials that you received prior to the meeting. Ms. Nicole Bunker Henderson, General Counsel, is available if you have any questions. Do you have any questions? Hearing none, we will move on to the next item. Agenda item 5B is an update on the 88th legislative session. This item does not require any action. Ms. Amy Peterson, Assistant Commissioner for External Relations, will present this item and be available for questions. Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Chairwoman Schwartz and committee members. Well, since our last meeting in January, the pace of the session definitely picked up. The committees are wrapping up their initial round of hearings, bills are being heard in the chambers, and then the bills are starting to move into the second chamber. Both chambers have passed their budgets earlier this month, and yesterday the Budget Conference Committee got to work. The conferees will split up into their work groups to reconcile the different articles of the budget. Senator Brandon Creighton and Representative Gary Van Dever are going to be handling Article 3, which includes higher ed. For the coordinating board, the House and Senate budgets are actually very close together. Most notable difference is that the House funded our exceptional item for innovation and collaboration, and the Senate did not, but both sides did fund all of our other exceptional items. The House and Senate both allocated additional funding for many of our healthcare workforce programs as well, just not in the same amounts or in the same programs. For example, the House added about $7 million in the family practice residency program and $6 million in the physician education loan repayment program. And then the Senate added a $25 million contingency for nursing scholarships. So a lot of money and a lot of those programs, just in different ways. There are much bigger differences between the two budgets for our higher ed institutions. The House includes about $1 billion over the Senate for some big ticket items like Hazelwood reimbursements, for higher ed group insurance cost, and for formula growth for the GAIs. Two other major funding decisions that are kind of outstanding are how much money they're going to put into the new Texas University Fund, as well as a new capital fund for TSTCs and the two-year institutions under the Texas State University system. But the good news is that both budgets still do contain $650 million for House Bill 8, which is our overhaul of the community college finance system. And that bill is actually making really good progress so far. It's currently over in the Senate and should get a committee hearing in the next week or so. Should move quickly after that. And we expect the Senate to pass a substitute that both sides have agreed to, so it won't need to go to conference. So it should be done relatively quickly. But I also wanted to highlight a few other bills we've been tracking. Some of them are both the House and Senate versions of bills to create the Texas University Fund. Those have all moved into the second chamber, and we do expect all of those to go into a conference committee. Senate Bill 902 and House Bill 1590, which codify our Texas Leadership Scholars Program, those have both also moved into the second chamber. And we're not sure which one's going to move, but one of them should get done pretty soon. And then on one last note, it looks like both chambers are going to pass Senate Bill 1659, which moves our sunset date from 2025 to 2029, which will give us a little more time to prepare for that process. So I think we will probably be sending y'all more frequent updates on bills and where they are in the process now that we're moving so quickly. So you can expect to see those. And if there's any specific bills y'all want to track, just let us know and we'll add those to our list. But happy to take any questions.
So, oh, go ahead. I was just gonna ask, Ms. Peterson, so we're getting close to the end, less than 30 days, but to be able to get a hearing, is there a cutoff date?
Well, so not technically, but there is a legislative deadline. I think it's May 12th. It's May 10th or May 12th is the last day for the House to hear House bills on the floor. And so really the last days that committees can report is about, I think it's like 3 or 4 days before that, just because of how long it takes to process.
Sunset date is currently what date?
2025. So we would have been starting that process as soon as this legislative, well, frankly, we had already started the process, but we would have been deep into it this summer.
Okay, any other questions? The updates you send are very helpful.
I was gonna say the same thing, those are very helpful. I always feel like I'm drinking water out of a fire hydrant. When I get those, they're so concise, it's really easy to follow.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we will move on to the next item. Ms. Nicole Bunker Henderson, General Counsel, will present this item. It's consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Board Rules, Chapter 1, Subchapter C, Standards of Conduct.
Good morning, still barely, Ms. Schwartz, members, thank you. This item presents the opportunity to revise our rules on standards of conduct. These are rules that apply both to the board and to the board's employees and generally govern the relationship between the board and the foundation. So the genesis of this rewrite is kind of twofold. One is the Administrative Procedure Act, state law requires us to review our rules every 4 years to make sure that they're current, that they reflect our current statutory authority, and that they're up to date. And so it was time for us to take a look at this rule in general and make sure that we were being thoughtful and cautious around compliance with state law for acceptance of gifts and donations. And then also with the substantial amount of gifts that the foundation has been providing to the agency, make sure that we had looked at the Sunset Commission's best practices around relationships with affiliated nonprofits. And so this rule doesn't represent a significant departure from the existing rules in there, but does specifically reference the foundation as it is currently composed, and then implements best practices, including kind of the permeability between the relationship with the agency and the foundation, how we could support the foundation, how the foundation can support the board. And then I do just encourage all the board members, if you haven't already, to make sure that you take a chance to look through the rules, because it does some of those govern and apply and govern the relationships of board members who sit on both the foundation and our board. So it's pretty clean, pretty simple, hopefully gets us all up to date and in compliance. Happy to answer any questions any board members have any.
What would you think are the biggest potential mistakes that people could make inadvertently between those members who are on them?
So, obviously, and this isn't really an ethics issue as much as an Open Meetings Act issue, but because of the number of board members that sit on the foundation board and this board, you have to be cautious about what items are discussed with other board members so that you don't, of our board, so that you don't have a walking quorum. I think it's just a reminder to be thoughtful about the gifts that that you might accept, right? And where those gifts are coming from. So it's very important for foundation board members to kind of understand their obligations on being a nonprofit board member. And our board members, are subject to a different set of laws on our board. And obviously the gifts and donations, we've tried to really streamline that process to make sure that we're logging those and tracking those in compliance with state law, so that we know, we're not getting into conflicts of interest areas between the acceptance of gifts from the foundation and the foundation's donors over to our board.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Hearing no other questions, I do have a motion to adopt. Do I have a motion to adopt the proposed amendments to Board Rules, Chapter 1, Subchapter C, Standards of Conduct?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Gahn,
Second.
second by Mr. Wilson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes.
Thank you all so much.
Agenda item 5D is security recommendations from a Department of Information Resource Contractor. This agenda item will be heard in closed session later in combination with lunch. Agenda item 6A is review of the fiscal year 2023 financial report to the board. This item does not require any action. Mr. Anthony Infantini, Chief Financial Officer, will present this item and be available to answer any questions. Mr. Infantini.
Hi. Good morning. I'm Anthony Infantini, Chief Financial Officer. It's my pleasure to present the financial report to the committee. So this report is the first 6 months of fiscal year 2023. Our fiscal year begins in September, and 2023 is the second year of our 2-year biennium. There's no material changes in the report from the prior quarter. As before, there are a number of budget adjustments, but they're largely due to 2 categories. One is our gear items that are moving funds provided previously in fiscal year 2022 to our current fiscal year for spending. And then there's unexpended balance or UB adjustments we do. They provide authority for us to move our budgets primarily within a biennium. So you see that activity a lot in the second year of a biennium. Same as last quarter, there's no red flags or major concerns with respect to the balances. We do work actively to clean up our balances through budget adjustments and are working proactively across the agency just to ensure our funding alignments are accurate with our goal of having a seamless financial flow to fund our agency needs. Another reason we're kind of working extra diligently on that is to help with our transition to CAPS financials, which is going to happen in the next fiscal year. This is a project that is going to impact a lot of agency financial processes and has occupied a significant amount of my staff time and will continue to do so for the remainder of this fiscal year. To give you a quick update, we've been working with the Controller's Office to configure the system and design our preliminary workflows, and we're going to start testing the system over the next 2 months. And I'll be happy to provide updates as soon as they are available on that. Shifting to the loan activity in the back of the report, loan demand has increased in this quarter from where we were 3 months ago. And now overall, we're fairly flat from the prior fiscal year. We're not expecting a ton of variation between now and when fall semester of loans should be issued. So kind of a good understanding where we are. We still are actively forecasting things such as economic conditions and this loan demand just to make sure we're issuing we go for our new bond issue that's at the right size. Speaking of the bond issue, we did receive confirmation from 2 rating agencies of our AAA credit rating. This is important because it'll help minimize the interest costs of our bond and therefore kind of minimize the rates the students have to pay on their loans. We're still targeting a July receipt of our bond proceeds and are actively monitoring the economic conditions to see if we can refund our 2013 bonds if there are sufficient savings to do so. That concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions you have.
University construction line item, what does that relate to?
So that was money that came to us in a special session 2 years ago. It was Senate Bill 8, I believe, and Senate Bill 52 work in conjunction. That was money given to us to give to agencies to help with institutions for their capital construction projects. There was this predates me, but I know there was the intent was to use some federal money, but we had to shift to general revenue. So that's what happened in this year. We were waiting for a determination on the source of funds that we could use. So that money was given to us with very strict kind of, here's how you will deploy that money into institutions. So that was given out earlier in this fiscal year.
So is it already predetermined as to how that money is allocated?
Yeah, it was predetermined.
The projects that it's going to.
I don't know if it determined the exact projects. I think there was flexibility there that beyond the fiscal part of my thing, but it was who got the money and kind of the amounts were pretty rigidly kind of provided.
I guess we'll see that later when projects are identified.
Yeah, I have the same question because it wasn't in our original budget.
Yeah.
So,
No, this is an ad.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking.
yeah, no, that's the same question I had.
It's a one-time money, and because it's general revenue, it showed up. You know, it hit this fiscal year. I think the outflows happened, I want to say a couple of weeks before I started in October, when we deployed that money to the institutions, once we had guidance on what funds to use.
And the increase for Baylor College of Medicine, what's the nature behind that? That's like $1,700,000.
Like everybody else, right?
I do believe, generally speaking, that's leftover money from the prior year, but I mean, that specific one there, you can see the number. of
Yeah, it's a
adjustments.
budget increase.
Yes, it is. And that's common in the second year of the biennium. Yeah, if you all page 16, it's, yeah, it was just leftover money from 2022. So the rider that kind of governs that money, a lot of our riders will let us move money that's remaining in the first year of the biennium to the second year. So you'll see a lot of those adjustments. That's one.
Yeah.
There's anything in here that you see that's out of the ordinary?
No, just, I mean, like I said, there's gonna be a lot of adjustments. The gear, I think, is the one-time stuff that probably is unique to those of you that have been here for a couple of years. But it's just more just managing the money and shifting it around, nothing. The balances that are positive, we look at those balances in the beginning of your package. Really, and we level below what you're seeing there to really make sure we're aligned on the detail numbers. We don't want the budget or the money to be the reason something doesn't get done, you know, if we have the authority to move it around. So no reference.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Infantini. Agenda item 6B is consideration of possible action to approve payment to the U.S. Treasury in August of 2023 of an amount up to $6 million from the Texas Opportunity Fund for excess earnings related to the 2023 aid refunding. Mr. Anthony Infantini, Chief Financial Officer, will present this item and be available to answer questions.
So I'm presenting a fairly unique item for approval with respect to payment. It's been about 10 years in the making. Yeah. Presentation.
Just putting it on set, taking a moment, sorry.
I'm sorry. Pardon me?
I think we have a presentation that can help guide this. So we're not terribly technical with the information, but the next slide's on that. So the bonds to fund our student loan program are tax exempt. That means they're subject to a number of federal regulations, including something called arbitrage rebate requirements. What it means technically is any excess earnings measured against the yield of bonds could potentially need to be repaid to the US government. What we have a significant payment due this August that arose from the 2013 refunding. So you go to the next slide. Next. So in 2013, the coordinating board performed a very significant refunding of multiple bond series. There was one fixed rate bond and all the remaining of our variable rate bonds in our portfolio. Go to the next slide. So there are a number of benefits, primarily locking in. There was very low interest rates at the time. Also removed all the variable rate bonds from our portfolio. Eliminated some risk with respect to that, and also had impacts with respect to the reserve requirements of the funds, as well as where the funds could be invested. Next slide. So the cash flow analyses at the time projected savings of about $13 million, which is quite significant. However, the student loan interest rates associated with the bonds are now more than the bond yield. So we knew at the time a portion of those savings were going to be reflected as a liability for future arbitrage payment. Next slide. As of last August, fiscal year 2022, the excess liability for the issue was $5.575 million. And we accrued it as a current liability since the payment's going to be due in this current fiscal year. The actual amount is still, the reason we're asking for $6 million, the actual amount will be determined in August. We won't really know the final number for that time, but we think that gives us sufficient cushion to make the payment. Next slide. So those are like the specifics on that payment. I do want to step back a bit and provide some more context on what we're talking about for your reference. With respect to our financial statements, there won't be a material impact on our net position because we have been accruing this liability for the last 10 years. So we just anticipate when the cash leaves, we anticipate an increase in our liability in fiscal year 2023. We also have upgraded our student loan systems at that time. One of the benefits has been to allow us to adjust interest rates on student loans. So what this can do is in essence help us decrease future arbitrage payments by reducing the excess earnings. Because if we can refund bonds, realize significant savings, we can pass those savings along to the students as opposed to sitting on those savings and needing to pay the IRS in 5 or 10 years down the line. I do want to point out the circumstances around this specific payment, the magnitude of the payment are unique. We have all fairly low fixed rate bonds in our portfolio. And given the interest rate environment in the past 10 years, any refundings that we do perform aren't going to generate the magnitude of savings that we saw in 2013. Also, just because we refunded so many series, that drove up the dollars of the savings as well. Kind of to that point, in our most recent analysis, the next payment like this at this point wouldn't be due until 2027, and we forecast it to be just about $100,000 at this time, and that changes over time. So the actual number, they usually do go down, these liabilities over time. So that concludes my presentation. I respectfully request approval on this so we can continue our preparation to make a payment to the IRS when it is due.
So is it not technically possible to use that excess to just pay down bond principal or credit back student loans that are paying us a higher interest rate than our bond face?
So the bonds are only callable at certain times to pay the next. So once we refund the bonds, they're usually non-callable bonds at that point. So we can't just take that money and buy back some of those bonds. I don't know if I answered the question precisely.
Yeah, the second question is, can we, rather than give it back to the pay it to the IRS, can we vote to credit it toward the subsidy on student interest payments on loans?
Yes, and that's kind of one of the points I was trying to make with our student loan system. We can more proactively adjust those rates. So the earnings that come from the students repaying the loans aren't too much in excess of the interest we're paying. So we can drive that.
So we're just in this spot now because
the system,
we didn't anticipate.
I think the die was just cast 10 years ago. Once the savings that were there, the benefits, the realities that were there, just and the systems that were in place, I think it was just a natural outcome of the refunding. I will point out, I mean, it was we still generated significant savings overall. So I think on a percentage basis, we target around a 3% savings to trigger refunding. Before the arbitrage payment, the benefits were around 11.4%, and even after this, it's still in the 6 to 7% savings. So it still was the right financial decision, and now hopefully we can adjust, make it so that the benefits kind of can be felt by the right people going forward. Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think but retrospectively, with that 6 million, you can go back and refund.
Correct. No, there was no, the system was kind of on a more proactive basis, right?
It's just a little spread.
Okay, any other questions? If not, do I have a motion to approve payment to the U.S. Treasury in August of 2023 of an amount of $6 million from the Texas Opportunity Fund for excess earnings related to the 2013A refunding? A motion?
So moved.
Donna Williams, do I have a second? Any discussion? Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 7A is discussion of on auditing standards number 115. The auditor's communication with those charged with governance. This item does not require any action. Ms. Susan Warren, audit partner, and Shannon Camels, senior manager from KPMG, will present this item and be available to answer any questions. Ms. Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members and board members. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today to do the planning for the August 22 audit, and that was great timing on that presentation because that's in the audit. We do have a deck up here if we want to move into the next slide here. This is just our scope. We'll do the required communications. Those are the things that the auditing standards tell you. We have to tell you every year. So I know some of you will say, well, we heard that last year. I'm sorry, I do have to tell you every year so I can provide professional standards. We will stick through our key risk and audit plan, and then tell me just a little bit about the scope of the audit. On the next slide. So this is the engagement team. Just as you know, look at myself and Shannon there in the middle. The other people on here are all returning from last year, so that's helpful for both the coordinating board and KPMG because we have returning manager personnel to the team. We do have a actuary specialist because of the OPEB and pension liabilities. We also have IT, obviously, with all your IT systems. And then we have a second partner, David, and then Shannon and Jackson assist me with the actual audit work. And then Shannon's going to take over and do the required communications.
So you can advance 2 slides. This slide just summarizes some of the points that I'm going to go through in subsequent slides, but just as a reminder, we do our audit in arrears. So this is our kind of planning for the year ended August 31st, 2022. Next slide, please. These are just some reminders on materiality. We involve both qualitative and quantitative considerations as well as our professional judgment to focus on matters that are material to the financial statement users. And next slide. And here's a bit on our timeline. For the past few months, we've been working through our risk assessment procedures and planning, as well as our IT and application control test work. And then this past month, we've kicked off our standard audit procedures. We'll also be working through testing any relevant controls. And then starting in May, we'll work through evaluation of our audit results, as well as any other communications and issue our reports come June. Next slide. So here we have our significant risks. We have identified 2 for this audit. The first being the risk of management override of controls, which is present at all entities, which is our fraud risk. And then we've also identified a risk concerning capacity and sustainability of coordinating board personnel, as the coordinating board is executing significant strategic objectives and there's competing priorities that could result in increased susceptibility for error. The next slide goes through our significant audit areas. These are the same audit areas that we've identified in the past, which we highlight largely due to materiality, including student loan balances, debt and debt covenants, financial assistance expenses, grant revenues and related balances. And then the next slide also highlights OPEB and pension obligations. And then, as mentioned, we do evaluate IT systems and test the general control environment and application controls. Here on the next slide, we do involve actuary, as Susan had mentioned, to help us gain comfort over the assumptions for reasonableness for OPEB as well as pension obligations. And then this next slide here is just a summary of the SAS 134 new reporting standard effective for fiscal year 2022, which will be impacting the form of our audit report, which we will be issuing in June. And now Susan is going to talk a little bit on independence and go through the required papers.
Any questions before we move to the part question? Any questions? All right, on the next slide, independence. This is just a reminder that it's a shared responsibility of management governance. This tells you the KPMG systems that are in place to make sure that we aren't having conflicts of interest or doing things that we then turn around and audit. I mean, obviously, I help put in an IT system and then turn around and audit. That's an independence issue. So we do monitor all of that from that perspective. But it also goes to relationships on the right. We want to make sure that we keep our relationships with the board members and the management at arm's length. We don't have any personal relationships that would interfere with our business decisions. Responsibility here, that's just 3 little buckets on the next slide, and that management obviously communicates to you the governance matters that they are required to. In the middle there, basically, we have our required communications today, and then we'll have a similar deck when you issue the report to come back and make those presentations from that perspective. On the far right, that top part there tells you what we have to do in case we can't issue the audit. I'm not anticipating that, but we are required to let you know there is a process to go through if we end up with not being able to issue the audit. The bottom 2 paragraphs there on the right tell you that we will, and we've been hired to form and express an opinion on the financial statements for August 22. And then that drives our overall audit strategy to be able to come back and communicate the results. The final slide is the inquiry slide. And yes, these questions are the same as last year. The standard hasn't changed. As I mentioned, I do have to ask every year. So nods of the head would be appreciated so we can have some involvement from the committee, please. Are there any particular matters relevant to the audit as far as violations of laws or regulations that I would need to follow up with Nicole or other members that you're aware? Thank you. Any significant communications with regulators that generally probably would be like the IRS, some of that nature, Department of Ed, that you've had to deliberate and make decisions on? Yeah. Thank you. From a financial reporting perspective, this is kind of a catch-all, but any new laws or changes in standards that you're aware of that have affected the recording of financial transactions? Okay, moving to the middle there, and any knowledge of any alleged fraud, and this is as of a coordinating board employee. It's not the individuals receiving the grants and things at the universities. Any knowledge of such that I would need to follow up on? Thank you. The bottom section down here, the second bullet there, appropriate persons of governance structure. What this means is if we come up with something during the audit that the commissioner and we talk about and we don't want to wait till June to come visit with you, we like to have a protocol already established so we know what that is. Historically, you've asked us to call the chair and let the chair decide whether to convene a special meeting or not. Is that the process you would like to continue?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Responsibility allocated between management and those parts of governance. What this is asking is if you removed, that's usually the, or added any significant approval authority down to your management team. So let's say you have $1 million contract threshold, you took it up to 5 million. That obviously impacts my audit for perspective. Just need to know if you've made any decisions like that.
Not this year.
Thank you. More areas that warrant particular attention. These would be things that you've spent a lot of time talking about, maybe when in special session on things like that, or closed session, just things that were of significant nature that ultimately could have a financial impact and or disclosure requirements. Okay. From an internal controls perspective, that next big one's about controls. Any concerns with failures of controls? If they're fairly large, usually they get reported up to the board. Could be a manual oversight or it could be an IT issue, not functioning correctly, but any knowledge of such. Significant unusual transactions, those are going to be things that are really out of the ordinary. I know gear obviously is a little out of the ordinary, so I've already got that on the list, right? The arbitrage payment is another one. Yes, we got that one. And then I know there's a lot of things in this session that will ultimately impact you going forward that really aren't part of the 22 audit. We are a bit versed in those too. Anything from a 22 perspective, like where a large financial impact that you're aware of? Well, those are our prepared remarks. Does anybody have any additional questions for us?
I'd just like to state that we appreciate you calling executive committee and certain members. So this is not the only time we get privy to this information, but some of us do with the calls. It's from Susan Warren and KPMG to verify these. So Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Agenda items 7B, 1 and 2 are the auditor's updates on internal audit reports and activities. This item does not require any action. Before we take this up, though, I do have a special announcement to make about Mr. Pale. Mr. Pale has accepted a position as Audit and Ethics Division Director and Chief Audit Executive at Idaho National Laboratories in Idaho Falls, Idaho. As one of 17 national labs in the U.S. Department of Energy complex, Idaho National Laboratory is home to more than 5,700 researchers and support staff focused on innovations in nuclear research, renewable energy systems, and security solutions that are changing the world. What a fascinating organization. Mark has worked at the coordinating board since 2012 and for the state of Texas for over 33 years. So we are going to miss him very much, but are excited about the new opportunity he has in front of him.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's been a wonderful journey that started for me as a junior auditor at Texas A&M System in July of 1989. And so just getting the opportunity to work with you all and to work with so many dedicated public servants over the years has been great. And I'll certainly leverage that as I step into this new role. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate how much you've educated me as I came in here with very little understanding of the fiscal system, and you've been a wonderful resource. So thank you very much. Okay, now Mr. Mark Pale, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, and Mr. Paul Mayer, Assistant Director, Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item, agenda item 7B, 1 and 2, and are available to answer questions.
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Mayor to step into this role and begin briefing the board during this period of transition. So,
thank you, Mark. Sure. We have 2 reports on your agenda today, and should be in your materials. I think the second one, the Gear Administration Review, might be a separate document. I'd like to just briefly touch on both reports. First, we have an update to the continued Gear Fund Administration and Review and Advisory Services interim report for March 2023. You might recall this project represents a different internal audit approach. That is one of consulting on large-scale initiatives as they are in progress to provide critical advice to leadership on what we see working and what we recommend as improvements to the reduced risk. This report, including management actions in progress, is in your materials. It's a slide deck style report to help distinguish it as a consultative engagement. We made recommendations to continue to improve the organization of key documents needed to demonstrate compliance with federal grant requirements, as well as improve processes that promote consistency across divisions. For example, we recommended additional centralized monitoring for non-grant gear projects, further documentation of contract management and subrecipient monitoring checklists, and improvement in folder structure and project naming conventions. The commissioner and his team continue to respond with resources dedicated to this effort. Second, we have an updated internal audit follow-up status report. If you recall, we initiated this report last quarter to track internal audit and also outside audit recommendations and provide you with an all-inclusive list and whether or not recommendations have been implemented. We have removed the items that have been completed and added the recommendations with regard to the gear report that we just discussed. Currently, there are no recommendations that have unjustified delays or management is not moving forward, mitigating identified risks. That concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Pale and Mr. Maynard. Agenda items 8A, 1 through 4 are auditors' updates on state and federal compliance monitoring reports and activities. These items do not require any action. Mr. Mark Pale, Assistant Commissioner, Internal Audit and Compliance, and Mr. Paul Mayer, Assistant Director, Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and are available for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 3 types of state compliance monitoring reports that are included in your materials today. First, 3 formula funding project reports with no findings. So I have nothing further to note on those reports. Three reports related to sexual misconduct reporting that were previously discussed in the cause committee meeting, so nothing more to add there. And then leaving the compliance monitoring corrective action status report, and that I'll just briefly discuss. We briefly noted in our last update, the compliance monitoring corrective action status report is an ongoing list of recommendations that appeared in prior state compliance monitoring reports, and we have yet to verify as being completed. Starting this quarter, we attached that report separately, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward. With regard to federal compliance monitoring, we have completed our planning for our next cycle of FY22 gear reviews and continue to coordinate our gear compliance work with grant management personnel, including assistance with gear funds administration project that we talked about in the internal audit piece, as well as that update. Next, we recently hired a new federal compliance specialist for our Perkins grant program and are beginning to update our work in that area. Lastly, we are reviewing single audit documentation for the entities that receive federal grant funds through the coordinating board. And that concludes my report with regard to compliance monitoring. If you have any questions, I'd be more than willing to.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, best wishes to you, Mr. Pitt. Thank you. We will now take up item 5D, security recommendations from Department of Information Resources Contractor. The committee will meet in a closed meeting to deliberate the following matters. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.076, the committee will meet in closed section to discuss security recommendations from a Department of Information Resources contractor regarding a cybersecurity assessment conducted by the contractor. No other business of the committee will be discussed before we reconvene in open session. It is now 12:28 p.m. And we will convene the executive session. Board members, we will now move to room number 2.006 for the closed meeting. Board members will attending virtually. Please remain on the Zoom call while staff assign you to the executive session breakout room. Please be patient because it may take a moment before you see the pop-up message asking you to join the virtual breakout. You will automatically be moved into the executive session as soon as you click on join breakout room. And we will also have lunch for those of us who are present.
Just
This concludes the agency operational committee on it. The time is 1:16 PM. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Have a good afternoon.
Ask ChatGPT to write a fight song.
Yeah, we need to.
Well, no,